Okay, so you hear it all the time, right? On the news, in articles, just one giant number that's supposed to tell us how the entire economy is doing. Yep, I'm talking about GDP. It comes out every quarter, it can totally move the stock market, and you better believe politicians build entire campaigns around it. But what is it, really?
I mean, seriously, just stop and think about that for a second. How on earth do you take an entire country's economy, every single coffee sold, every car that rolls off the assembly line, every app someone downloads, and just boil it all down to a single number? It sounds kind of impossible, doesn't it?
Well, for the better part of a century, the go-to answer to that massive question has been this thing called gross domestic product. You know it as GDP. It's basically the main yardstick we use to get a handle on the size and the speed of a country's economy.
Okay, so let's break this formal definition down because honestly, every single part of it is super important. Market value, that's easy. It just means we use prices to add it all up. Makes sense. Final goods and services, hang on to that thought. It's a really key idea we're going to come back to. Within a country's borders means it only counts stuff made inside the country. Doesn't matter if the company is American or German or Japanese. And finally, in a specific time period, just means we're measuring it over a set window, usually a quarter or a full year.
All right, so how do they actually do it? How do economists come up with this gigantic number? Well, to really get what's being counted, we've got to pop the hood and look at the engine, the core formula. You can almost think of it like a recipe for the whole economy.
And here it is. This is the recipe. It's the most common way to calculate GDP, and it's called the expenditure approach. The logic behind it is actually pretty simple and, kind of brilliant. It's this. If something was made, well, then someone had to buy it, right? So if we just add up all the spending in the economy, that should give us a really solid estimate of all the production.
So let's walk through these letters real quick. First, you've got C for consumption. This is the big one, the real engine. It's you, me, all of us, buying everything from our morning coffee to a new car. Then there's I for investment. Now, this isn't stocks and bonds. This is businesses spending money on stuff to make more stuff. Think new machinery, buildings, and software. Next is G for government spending. Pretty straightforward, right? This is everything the government spends on, like building roads, schools, and paying soldiers. And last but not least, you've got this little part, XMI, which is net exports. That's just a fancy way of saying we take everything we sell to other countries and subtract everything we buy from them.
Okay, remember how I said to hang on to that phrase, final goods? This is where the calculation gets really smart. To make sure they don't count the same thing twice, which would totally inflate the number, GDP only looks at the final product. So for example, it counts the price of the car you buy, but it doesn't separately count the steel, the tires, and the glass that the car company bought to build it. Why? Because the cost of all those parts is already baked into the final price of the car. Pretty clever, right? It avoids all that double counting.
Okay, one last super important technical bit we have to cover, the difference between nominal and real GDP. So nominal GDP just uses whatever the prices are today. But that can be a little bit tricky. Think about it. If the GDP number goes up, is it because we actually made more stuff, or did the prices for everything just go up because of inflation? See the problem? That's where real GDP comes in to save the day. It's adjusted for inflation, so it strips out the effect of rising prices. This gives us the real picture of whether the economy is actually growing or not. It's the number that really matters for comparing over time.
All right, so that's the what and the how of GDP. But that leads us to the really big question, right? Why do we care so much? Why does this one number get so much airtime and end up on the front page of the news?
Well, it matters because it's become the main dial on the dashboard for a country's economic health. It's the go-to number. Governments use it to decide how to tax and spend. The Federal Reserve and other central banks are glued to it when they're thinking about interest rates. And of course, it's the number we all use to size up different countries and see who has the most economic firepower on the global stage.
Now, since the total GDP number is, well, astronomically huge, economists try to bring it back down to a more human level with something called GDP per capita. The math is simple. You just take that big GDP number and divide it by the number of people in the country. The idea is to get a rough sketch of the average person's standard of living. But, and this is a big but, that word average can hide a whole lot of details, as we're about to see.
But here's where this story gets a lot more complicated. For all of its influence, GDP is definitely not the whole picture. Not even close. It's a useful tool, sure, but it's far from perfect. And in fact, there's a really strong argument being made that by focusing so much on this one number, we might be missing the point. We might be overlooking what actually makes a society a good place to live.
And that right there is the fundamental challenge to GDP's top spot. Think about it.
Does a bigger GDP automatically mean a better society? Is just growing the economy, no matter how we do it, the only thing we should be shooting for?
Let's talk about some of GDP's huge blind spots. For one, it says absolutely nothing about inequality. The country's GDP could be soaring, but all that new wealth could be going to a tiny fraction of people. It also completely ignores all the unpaid work that makes society function, caring for kids, volunteering, you name it. And get this, GDP can actually go up after a disaster. A huge earthquake that requires billions in rebuilding, that actually adds to GDP. It just has no way to measure things we really care about, like clean air, a healthy environment, or just general happiness and well-being.
Because of all these issues, people have started coming up with other ways to measure progress. A really famous one is the Human Development Index, or HDI. What it does is take income, yeah, it still uses a version of GDP per capita, but it combines it with other really important things, like how long people are expected to live and how many years of schooling they get. It's trying to get a picture of what people are capable of, not just what the economy is producing.
You know, this phrase really just nails it. It perfectly sums up how most economists think about GDP today. It's necessary, we need it. You can't just throw it out because it tells you something really important about the economy. But it is absolutely not sufficient. It's not enough on its own to tell us if a country is truly thriving.
And that leaves us with a really big question to chew on. For decades, GDP was the scorecard. A rising number meant success. Simple. But if our real goal isn't just to have a bigger economy, but to build a better society, a society that values things like health, happiness, and sustainability, then what should our new scorecard be? What are the numbers that truly define success? That's a question worth thinking about.